Hello, my name is Ulrik and I'm the audio designer for Lightmatter. I've been working on the music and all the effects and all sound in the game. We're going to talk a little about Can't Walk in Shadow, this level. And the last level was Virgil's office, and there was a lot of noise, and you are crashing with this elevator into this level. So to make a contrast from all the noise in the previous level, it's actually pretty quiet in this level. So you start up with almost no sound, and then later on we fade in some music.
So, I remember this level is actually the first level we really decorated. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was the time when we had just decided that, okay, this part of the game will be in the mine. And I was researching how mines looked like and noticed a lot of tracks, obviously. And in this decoration and defining the mine style, because this was the first level that was in the mine that we decorated, I had to come up with something that would just dictate the rest of the mine levels. And I saw these moving platforms and turning things, and I thought, okay, well, how does that make sense in any way to be a real life thing? And there was thoughts about how electricity...
Yeah, so this is one of the more fundamental puzzles in our game. It seems very simple because you don't just have a couple of lamps you can play with, but we found out that this is a really important concept that this level teaches you.
Yeah, it's a concept that we use in different puzzles where we build on it, and that concept is being able to like bend around corners with light. Mm-hmm. So use one lamp to.
So in this level, the player once again sees the core, but now from the bottom, very bottom of the core in the mine. And it was important for us to show the core again because it's such a big part of the story of this game, and you're gonna see it throughout the whole game in different places. And also, like having a huge beam, science beam extending through the whole facility, it's just cool. Awesome.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things we talked about a lot back then was also the Citadel in Half-Life 2, like having this landmark.
Half-Life 2 once again.
Yeah, that you keep moving towards, like like a goal. Yeah.
Yeah, and this was where we actually started building the look of the core, because even though you see it in the upper levels of the facility first, we didn't have those levels built at that point where I was decorating this one. And we had to come up with how it looks like, and we always knew it connects some crystals. At some point it was 3 with 1 in the middle, but not anymore. But I knew that there had to be a crystal that's huge, or an amalgamation of crystals that are connected. But one crystal turned out to be a bit more readable, and we had to suspend it and give it a certain look that would be recognizable after having played puzzles for an hour. So it was one of the bigger props, so something interesting. And given that we already had the light beams that you walk around with the photon connectors, and those were expanded on...
So this level had an interesting story. When we created first, we used Lego. What was the point or the idea of this level?
When we were designing this level, we were very much in the phase of making puzzles where the player has to predict that some things will happen. So the basic concept for this puzzle was leaving a lamp in the dark and predicting that you might need it later.
Yeah, because we saw some players, some players had a hard time understanding that it's only the player who cannot stand in shadows. Like you can leave something out in the shadow and then get back to it later. So you could place a lamp and then change some other part of the level, and then depending on where you put that lamp beforehand, you could use that to actually solve a puzzle.
Yes. And it turned out that this puzzle was much harder than we originally thought it would be. even after we worked on the readability of the puzzle and really made everything easy to understand, then it was still difficult for people to play. And in the beginning, they could spend 15-20 minutes completing this puzzle.
Yeah, and one thing when you design puzzles is very difficult to know if the puzzle itself is difficult or if it is just the readability of it, like if it is too cluttered. I remember when we made it in the first iteration, it was very difficult to read and like where's the goal, where I'm supposed to go.
Yeah.
And over time we kind of like took things away and made it simpler and simpler to focus on the core part of the puzzle. And now it's this level where we actually just have like two main parts of the level, where you have a lamp with the moving platform and then you have a lamp on the other side, and there's a gap, so you cannot get those two lamps next to each other. So you have to figure out how can I use them to my advantage. Yeah, so one element in this game is dexterity-based puzzles, and for a long time we were very unsure if we actually wanted it or not, because for us, Lightmatter is a game where you have to think and like solve puzzles, but doing it should not be the difficult part. So even if you're not good at like first-person controls, you should still be able to complete a puzzle if you can like think and solve the puzzle up in your head. The controls should not be what is preventing you from doing it. That being said, we also thought it was a little like too obvious not to have moving shadows. So I guess this level is like a good way to kind of have something where you have to understand that a shadow coming close to you and you have to kind of jump over it while it approaches you, but doing it should not be too difficult. But I guess you came up with this initial concept, and you had some.
So this small puzzle is very simple, but we like it a lot. No, it's to this day kind of still baffles us that it is challenging, because the concept is so easy. It uses the properties of the lamp, portable lamp, basically as it is, and the light cone, meaning that the farther away it is from something, the more it illuminates in front of it.
So, speaking generally about this level, it's actually a primer level, meaning that it leads up to the next level that comes afterwards. And when we have been making puzzles, like oftentimes you actually end up making really hard puzzles to start out with that introduces a lot of new elements for the player, and we found out that that was actually too much to chew on for a lot of players to get all this new information on how to do stuff. So this level was actually an offspring of the next level, like to prime and to like teach the player this new functionality with the rotating fan here. And
so this was one of the levels that were originally built with Lego. I think I had a time where I designed a lot of Lego puzzles, like with things that were turning around, and this was one of the puzzles that we felt fit the game, and also one of the older puzzles that we had a long time ago.
One of the very first, actually, more difficult ones.
Yeah. So we more or less made this concept in Lego, and then we took it further into the game itself, and there were some difficulties with designing this puzzle. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yes, there were actually quite a lot. I think this is also one of the levels that has went through most iterations over the time. As you mentioned, it was one of the first puzzles, so we've had a lot of time to. We've always believed in this puzzle and thought that it could become good in the end. Yeah. So it has been in the hands of actually quite a few people who has made it work better and better over time. Like for the setting of for the puzzle, we knew that.
So this level is quite important in terms of the release of this game, because as an indie game company, publishing a game is quite difficult. There come a lot of games on Steam every day, and we needed something extra to kind of like be recognized with our game. And we've been for a long time been looking.
In this level, Uno Dos, we kind of had the idea that we wanted to make a more vertical level, and to be able to move vertical in Lightmatter, we kind of needed a way to bring the lamps. So we went with the idea of using an elevator.
Build the puzzle around it, right?
Exactly.
Mm.
And the first thing was, the first idea we got was to put this lamp on top of the elevator, so you would actually be in the elevator and have the lamp just above you.
So the roof of the elevator. Yeah.
Exactly, the roof.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this was one of the many wall/sensor levels that we made, one of the better ones, and we tried to use this sensor in a new way. Can you explain how we did this concept with lights and sensors?
Yes. So the idea is that the ability to jam a gate, keep it open and kind of swap the lamps around, what lamp, the idea of bringing one lamp to the end of the puzzle by jamming the gate, basically, with two lamps. And also I remember the interesting part from the beginning was the idea that you have to keep holding the lamp on the sensor while you walk through the gate.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of people, when they tried the first time, they accidentally light the lamp away from the sensor and the gate closes and they have to do the thing again. But at first it might seem unsatisfying, but it's a good setup for a eureka moment.
Yeah.
People are now I get it. We even, just because we thought it was fun, we even made Virgil laugh at the player if you actually do it, if you close the gate.
That was pretty funny. And it's one of the more interesting things when making games is just observing how players, playtesters, they play the game and just using that. For example, that thing where the gate shuts down, then it's just funny to kind of use that with small commentary from Virgil.
Mm.
And this is also one of the first levels where we actually have a cat in the game, Lux, that you might have found. And Lux actually started out as more or less a joke that one of our interns made. And I think she said something like, people on the internet, they like cats. And we said, yeah, they do. So how about we get it in somehow? And in the beginning it was just a small thing, but over time it grew bigger and bigger, and we started recording voiceovers for it as well. And I think this idea of James having a cat was kind of an interesting thing, and also that Virgil can show a little more of a soft side because he kind of cares about Lux, as far as I understand.
Yeah, but he just won't admit it.
Yeah.
And then he just, his excuse for liking Lux is just because James, it keeps James happy.
Yeah.
And James is important for Virgil, but yeah.
And we, because we were recording these voiceovers, we also needed some cat sounds, and just for fun, we asked our Discord community if they could record a lot of cats, their own cats, and I think 10 or 15 people sent it in to me, and we're actually using those sounds at random, so maybe your cat is in our game.
Yeah, we even have one cat called Virgil.
Yeah. Yeah, that was so weird.
Yeah.
One of our, one person from our publisher, he has this cat called Virgil, and every time he plays the game, it's so strange that, yeah.
But I think it was a good. That's our way to get a collectible in the game also.
Yeah.
To give a newer dimension to the puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like you have.
So this level is not a puzzle. It serves as a kind of a break room, if you can call that. We found out during testing that the puzzle you just came from and the next one you're gonna experience, those two were very tough on the testers. They were at the end of the test, they were very exhausted and almost
giving up.
They almost gave up during the puzzles. So we had to introduce a break.
So this is yet another level that was made originally with Lego. We had a session where we wanted to have a lot of things turning and moving around. Before we had kind of these fans that were rotating, and this is kind of the same, but just rotating more like in a square, so to speak. We built the level in Lego where you had these buttons you can push and these kind of platforms or wagons that you can move around, and you put the lamps on top of them and then you send them away. And it was interesting because the lamps that you send away, you need to be careful what direction they are pointing because you need the light from the lamps. So the whole idea was that you have multiple lamps and platforms, and you put them and you send them away, and hopefully you don't die in the process.
Mm-hmm.
So when we made the level, it was kind of confusing and quite complex in Lego, but then we got some of the rest of the team to come and playtest it, and clearly there was something in this level that was interesting because we could see that just figuring out what direction to point the lamps was interesting for them. And when you play the game, or when you play the level from above, like with Legos, you have a much better overview, so oftentimes the puzzles are much easier in Lego format. But here, it turned out that this level was actually quite difficult. So we knew we had something, and then we started making it in Unity.
Yeah, just a simple, like, format.
Yeah.
Tile-based.
Yes.
Very easy. And I think the interesting thing is also, depending on how you rotate the lamp and send it away, you get a different result.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you have to foresee how you need to place it and push the button to send it away.
Yeah.
And there's also something about, since it's a square pattern they move in, they also come back to you. So you have to calculate, how do I need to place this? If, for instance, I need to get it to the last station away from you to illuminate something you need, or whatever it was. And actually, this level now consists of 2 puzzles, and the one Gustav just talked about is the original one, and that's the one that you'll find upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
So the downstairs one, that only has 2 platforms moving in their own patterns, on their own tracks, back and forth. And that was kind of, we felt like we needed a primer, because through testing we found out that the original one was too difficult.
Yeah.
People couldn't, like those, I don't know if it was an information overload or they just simply didn't have the overview.
It was both a big puzzle, like physically it was quite big, but also understanding this concept, and it was just a lot of new things at the same time.
Yeah. It is also, it tricks the player.
Yeah.
In especially the last part of it. So yeah, designing the primer was done in a separate level actually, but we felt that having 2 of these levels right after each other, like they pretty much looked the same. Of course there were subtle differences, but we thought that it might be cool to combine them into one level. So
Yeah, I think this level is a good example of how we structured the facility, how we structured the levels in the game. And it all went back to when we actually had designed and implemented basically all puzzles in the game. At that point, we were like connecting the dots and like and really structuring the narrative, because the narrative came after the puzzles and after the mechanics in this game. And we basically put all our puzzles up on a huge board, like almost 40 puzzles, and structured which parts of the facility they would belong to. And we knew that we wanted a progression where you go through like the mine, the factory part, and a lab, and that was basically based on like how well does this level fit for that. Does this level seem like a tunnel you're walking through? Maybe it fits in the mine, stuff like that. This level is basically, we knew that the structure of the game would be linear, but in order to break it up a bit, we used this level as kind of a breather, or like a contrast, that okay, there's actually something you return back to after the elevator crashes, and that was just to spice it up a bit, so it wouldn't only go from A to B all the time, but go back. And I think this level is also a good example of how it kind of merges.
Yes, so this is the second level of puzzle using the portable light beam after the tutorial that you just went through. And in this puzzle we really wanted to emphasize the connecting and breaking of the light beam so you have to move a lot around with the light beam to connect it from different places, and also get the sense or learn that you can place a light beam in a certain position and then return to it later on, or use the result of its placement later on in the puzzle. It's okay to leave the light beam in places, and you have to at some points. So it is a lot of back and forth, at least for the first light beam, where you have to place them in the correct spots to be able to first retrieve a moving platform, and then later on use that same moving platform to progress through the level and connect with whatever, or the light beam that you placed earlier on.
Yeah, and where you have to leave the light beam, I knew that this spot had to feel somehow special, and at that point in decorating levels, I had landed on this recipe where we placed tiles, we placed things that matter and all the important objects, and that was about it, with making some sense of the levels. But this one, I felt like it had to be something different, because the tiles were getting boring, and of course we wouldn't want players to get bored. So I've decided that, okay, this whole middle section of a level, that is going to be a very, very big machine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so big that I almost don't need to decorate the whole level.
Mm-hmm. It works.
Yeah, sort of. It had this tunnel thing in the middle that you...
So this level puzzle, whatever you want to call it, I don't know if you can call it a puzzle, is a bit different from the rest of the levels in the game. It was one of the actually easiest ones to design and implement, because it solves itself as soon as you are kind of going through it. Of course, there were some designing the alignments of objects that had to align correctly for you to connect beams and so on. But once we kind of made it and tested it internally, we found out that it had something that the others didn't have. It had a lot of kind of exploration and connecting and disconnecting beams, like all of a sudden, like this flow. Almost when they're set up correctly, you almost flow through the level, and you can't really place the connectors wrongly after that. It is a walk in the park or a walk in the office once it's set up correctly. So it was actually a piece of cake to make this one. It had a different setting at one point, but like trying to get it into our what it is now, like an office area. It was we needed actually some things to block the light beam at certain places. That's where we came up with the cubicle walls, for instance.
I remember that like before this, we didn't have much variation in the lab levels, and seeing these cubicles in this office was really a new step.
Yeah, and they were great because the cubicle walls because they don't fit into the system of modularity, but you could place them wherever you wanted, and we could place them exactly where we wanted, and that was important for this level because it had to be aligned correctly, as I said earlier, for it to work. Some other levels, like in the game, weren't as easy to like figure out and implement. But luckily, Matthias, a guy who was part of the development for the first couple of years, he was really good at taking a very bare puzzle idea to find the interesting parts and really find what was interesting in puzzles.
Yeah, and especially the puzzles that were made by us programmers that really had a hard time, like with framing, and the puzzles were really ugly. He was good at kind of making them more readable and by framing stuff.
Yeah. He was also our primary tester for a long time, so he tested on people outside the company. So he got a first-hand glance at what worked and what didn't work in puzzles. So he had a benefit of that knowledge and could quickly change up things sometimes he will also explain like changes to us, to the others of us in the company to look at it, for instance. But it really sped up the process of finding good pacing and good puzzles for the game. And then, once we had that, we stringing them together in the pace and making them into levels to what they are now was the next step. And yeah, it was one big collaboration, really.
I think it's. I just thought of when you talked about the cubicles, how there is actually a visual artifact in that the light beams, they shine through the cubicles. And the funny reason for that is that the light beams, they work on a different lighting system. Like they're area lights. And because our shadow system is very specific to spotlights, it was just too much work to implement that for these custom area lights. Because otherwise we have a rule in our game where all walls have a certain thickness. But sometimes we've broken that rule, and we didn't notice until afterwards. But like no one has pointed it out.
So it basically meant the thickness of the wall would cover up that the light was shining through,
exactly,
like the wall panels.
Yeah, because the light doesn't cast shadows. The light beam light, at least. And another fun fact is that like the dialogue in this level, I think we kind of use that as a rule of thumb or like a reference for how to like develop humor in the game, because when we wrote the whole script very bare, like with not a lot of humor, just like with the key information that we want to convey to the player, and we had a hard time like developing the humor of the game. But this level we just randomly stumbled upon the joke, like we just came up with it while explaining to the player what the mission was, where Virgil says that I'm limited by my body but not my mind, so I wasn't able to get around the obstacles. As you have the opposite problem, you'll play a part in this. And it triggered something like in the whole company where like that was the main joke that people laughed at. And I think the reason why it works is because it's just it's a really subtle jab. It's like a really subtle insult, and an intelligent insult, and it fit for like this elitist CEO guy. So we just used that, like we just kept looking at that joke when we started spicing up the whole, like all the dialogue, trying to make it funnier. We kept looking at this one.
Was that before?
Now that Ellen is the first this character talking this level, I think we can take a moment to talk about like directing. All Ellen's dialogue was recorded like as the last after the majority of David's dialogue was recorded, and
not even recorded, also written after.
Yeah, exactly, yes. And the way that these have like the way that we've recorded Ellen's voice or Natalie's voice and David's voice are different.
Yeah.
Natalie lives in the U.S. and we live in Denmark, so it's natural that we should communicate. Like we can't be in the studio with her, but she has a home studio, and we simply communicated through emails. And I think that actually went surprisingly well.
It's a good thing that this wasn't your first task as your first experience as an instructor director. Sorry. And to do this instructing,
yes,
because it's a whole new door to a whole new universe. Like this thing, if you haven't done it before.
Yeah, directing is a skill in itself, of course, and it was only because we had been in the studio with David so much that I was actually able to direct Natalie on my own, because in the studio we had Thomas Hovald, who is our script advisor or supervisor, but also the VO director.
Exactly.
We have a bit of history with him. Yeah,
like back at university, like half of us have had him as our teacher. How long was it? Like about 1 year into production or so, 2 years into production, we we knew that he was also a screenwriter, etc. In his spare time as well, and we didn't ask him about help with our story because we were kind of stuck at that point, going.
Yeah, so this was one of the puzzles that you designed. Can you talk a little bit about the story behind it?
Yeah, we had different periods where we all pitched in on ideas for puzzles, and in this period we needed more puzzles with the sensor.
Yeah.
And some of the puzzles we made before was easy to make, and they just came to us. But this one was a bit harder.
Yeah, we did have some sensor puzzles, but only with the lamp. But now we needed it with the photon connector.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, and I think I actually made 5 different puzzles, or something like that, to come up with this idea. And the idea was that we wanted to be able to, we wanted to make it so that if the player put a light beam.
You have these doors that open up and closes, and you have to kind of put it behind it.
Yeah, the sensor controls the doors, and then the idea was that you should kind of break the beam, and close the door, and let the light beam for its be in a specific place, and then use that later in the puzzle.
Yeah, and I remember when I played it the first time. It took a little while for me to understand that concept, but it was really nice to just leave it out in the darkness and then come back to it later. But I also remember that the first version of this level was way bigger and a little more like confusing to look at. So that's also something we spent a lot of time on, like making the initial layout of the level, but then trying to make it simpler and like cut away the things that don't really contribute to the level. And oftentimes that means like making it smaller and not having a large playable area, especially with something like this, where if you place the lamp one spot and then if it is like a couple of centimeters wrong, then it might not connect when you open the door. Yeah. And that is annoying. So it should be really easy to just put it down.
Yeah, and I think Lasse did a really good job making this a lot smaller than it was from the start.
Yes. And it's funny when we design puzzles, like different people in our team are really good at coming up with the idea and the concept, but other people are better at like taking that and perfecting it basically. And like I guess we both just make crazy levels, and then somebody else takes it over and like make it better and more readable and simplifying.
Yeah, and it's also funny because we actually work a lot. Very different when we make puzzles. You like the Lego thing, and I really like just playing with stuff in Unity. So that's kind of how I work. So it is different.
But sometimes you also need to know where you want to end up. Like what is the plan for a level? Other times you just put a lot of stuff in, and then sometimes it works, and sometimes there's a part of a level that works.
So this level, where to start? It is such a big level. From the beginning, we always wanted to make a suspenseful ending, and we always knew that doing that, especially like with like the ideas that we had, would be a huge task, and it did become a huge task. We thought about like alternatively, what if the player goes up to the core and presses a button and destroys it, and the game ends like that. You pressing a button, and it just always felt underwhelming. Pulling a lever. Yeah, exactly. And so we went with it and try to make this like dexterity-based ending. Also because we throughout the project, all the way back from our university project, we actually got some positive feedback on the levels that were a bit more platforming based, like jumping over shadows, like fans casting shadows and you jumping over them, and people always thought that element was interesting, so we thought we should have that in the game. And it just
a quick note. Actually, early on we kind of threw them aside because we were afraid people would like put the game aside if they came to some platforming that they couldn't complete.
Yeah.
So it was actually, for a long time, we didn't want any challenging dexterity platforming elements.
Yeah, that's true. But we felt it made sense in the ending because it fit with the like more suspenseful build up we wanted.
Tempo,
Yeah, exactly. And story-wise, we want the player here to we want Virgil just to be like not caring about the player. That once the player found out that you can't turn off the shadows by turning off the core, then Virgil is more like, you're just gonna stay in there. You turn on the sprinklers, all that, and even when the player tries to turn on the core again, like he's just like, what are you gonna do? You can't get out of that room. And that moment where before Ellen starts talking, the idea was to have a bit of like a all is lost moment, like where okay, I'm stuck in this room, what to do? But then Ellen comes in and tells you about the sequence that she made, so you can get out to the other control rooms. But we still, even when writing her dialogue, we still didn't want it to be so obvious. Yeah, I'm just gonna listen to what she says. We want a little bit of doubt, like when she says, "Trust me, you'll survive," and it feels like, will I? And yeah, we just want a bit mystery with that. And I also remember that it was very nice when our graphic artist upstairs, she made the like screen where you actually can see Ellen for the first time. It just felt nice for that room, and also you are in there for a while. And I guess we wrote ourselves into a corner there. And yeah, it's possibly too long, the dialogue in here, but it gets across what it needs to, we think.
Yeah.
When you get out of the room, we had a problem where people were like, hey, well, why can't I hear Virgil talk? And the answer to that is, of course, he doesn't know that you broke out of the room, so he's no reason to reach out to. He's building his solution to Lightmatter. But then it just felt empty until you get to the second control room and he finds out what you're doing. So until then, like in that space, we added the voiceover with Lux pressing the button and activating the intercom and just so you feel that okay, he's still up there working on things.
Lux is the cat, to those who don't remember.
Exactly, Lux is the cat. But he also says that in the voiceover. But and we just want him to be angry at the cat and basically almost hit the cat in there, because now Virgil is an evil man. He doesn't like cats anymore. Because that's the definition of evil. So after the second control room and all of the dexterity stuff, I'm just jumping towards the end here. The reason why we have James come back and save the player is kind of to show that even the people that Virgil really thinks are loyal to him and follow him all the way, they end up betraying him, because no one what he's doing is crazy, and it's kind of to emphasize that and also give James a bit of a character arc, so he's not just super one-dimensional like this big sensitive man. He worries about people, and I think one of the big what can you say tasks or challenges with that was showing that James comes over and stops the gate from closing, so you can get out. And I think a lot of people, like, not everyone is going to see that. No. But at least in the dialogue we try to emphasize.
We also try to emphasize with the lamp being turned.
And
exactly. So on.
Yeah. So after that we have after you shut down, you overload the core. We have this epilogue where the screen turns white and Virgil speaks in like this completely clean voice, and for a long time the idea was that you actually wake up in the facility and the shadows are fixed, and the shadow anomalies are gone, and you slowly walk out of the facility through like a tunnel with like light at the end of the tunnel, stuff like that. Very symbolic. While Virgil is having like this defeated speech, but this speech that at the same time feels like a guilt trip. Like he's really trying to make you feel bad, and make you feel that maybe things could be done differently, and just have this bittersweet feeling that kind of sticks with you. Since we, as many other things, found out that in the end we didn't have resources to build that, it was low prioritized. We decided to make have this voiceover play when the screen is white, and we kind of felt that it would be more powerful. We thought that his performance, David's performance here, is already really powerful, but it would be even cooler if we just completely removed like the distortion on his voice that we usually have, just completely clean.
Just to the layer of the intercom is just gone, and now he's talking directly to the player. Yeah,
and that's to have like this bit ambiguous feel of, is he talking to the player character? Is he talking to the player? What is actually going on here? Is this in the afterlife? What is it? And we just thought that was interesting. And like, as I mentioned in one of these developer commentaries earlier, the game started as like a purgatory story, like in a dream, and we kind of felt it was fun to have that like doubt. Well, is it that, like, just the ambiguity of it? You don't really know what the speech is. Is just like a quick view into Virgil's mind, or what is it? But there is so much else to talk about.
Yeah. This is a huge level, like really huge compared to all the others. All the other individual puzzles are in one scene, as it's called in Unity, in which we work and prepare that whole level. This is as well, but it consists of so many different level parts that should maybe have been in their own scene. So, as you can probably guess, it's also very performance heavy. We get around that by dynamically turning on and off parts of the level. That's also why some of the levels are hidden behind a lot of walls, and we use, for the first time in the game, glass that is completely opaque, so you can't see what's on the other side. That's because the level on the other side of that glass is not there right now. But yeah, making this level was somewhat challenging. It took a long time. It took multiple months to, like, from start to finish, and I'm gonna admit some times on the way making it, I felt like giving up because it was just so many parts of it that it needed to be made. We took inspiration from, as Benjamin also said, from our very, very first prototype of the game, where we actually had some dexterity puzzle platforming parts, and the fan part, which is one of the first ones you meet in this level, is taken directly from that. It just makes so much sense that you see in other games and in movies. Always there's these light shafts going through a fan that spins, and you get this nice atmospheric feel. But since we use light as a mechanic, we can obviously use it as a platforming as well. But all the levels weren't like connected like they are in this final version when we first began. It was basically making just come up with jumping challenges like in individual scenes, and then just see what fits, what doesn't. We made more than there are in this final version, but it was also like a question of, is it too much? So we had to cut off some of them, so we only took the best of them. And we have tried to kind of build up the difficulty a bit. Some of them are very easy, and you can kind of do them in your own tempo, whereas others are controlled by Virgil, where he actually tries to kill you by closing something, and then you obviously